Alright, hi. Continuing part 3 of your instruction manual 02301000101 revision 01, implementation National Environmental Policy Act, U.S. Department of Homeland Security. Um, part 5, procedure implementing national environmental policy. The overview of the National Policy Act with the requirement of the National Policy Act with the Department of Homeland Security decision makers systematically, and identify, evaluate potential environmental effect of the proposed action, make informed decisions. Therefore, the National Environmental Policy Act process must be completed with the Department of Homeland Security make with the final decision proposed action. National Environmental Policy Act apply with the major of the Department of Homeland Security action. If there's any doubt of the account of the National Environmental Policy Act with working through its respect of the EPPM, Environmental Planning Program Manager, Council of the Office of General Counsel, determine the National Policy Act, they apply with the proposed action example of the situation National Policy Act with the triggered with the very few with the include the case with the statutory actions exemption, secure the branch waiver compliant with such waiver the authority must be granted by Congress proposed exercise otherwise, and when action does not constitute a major federal action significantly affecting the quality of the human environment as termed has been interpreted as a regulation court decision. The National Environmental Policy apply with the proposed action with the 1 of 3 level of evaluation in the categories of exclusion, environmental assessment, environmental impacts statement, necessary with the 3 level of corresponding creep with the potential for the proposed action with the environmental effect with the National Policy Act, the documents such as the environmental assessment, environmental impact safety statements have no and merely similarly environmental impact evaluation as the way to communicate with the information the Department of Homeland Security decision makers public easily understandable form of the environmental planning program manager advises respect of the component of the appropriate level of the National Environmental Policy Act with analysis of the documentation, proposed action, evaluation, documentation requirements of the National Environmental Policy Act, summarized in Figure 1, described below 1 and displayed below. Components determine the Council of the Office of General Counsel with respect to the Environmental Planning Program Manager with appropriate analytical approach, including the National Environmental Policy Act, apply with the National Environmental Policy Act, does not apply components of the document determination future reference ensures appropriate compliance with the other requirements of the stewardship protection, human environment perceived with the proposed action emergency components filed with the emergency provision in Title 6. For other proposed action for the National Policy Act with the components of the review of the Department of Homeland category exemption, Appendix A, Table 1, follow the category exclusion application procedure for the Section 5, Part B, determine if one may apply. 4. If proposed action cannot be categorically excluded for the components normally being part of the part of the environmental assessment, evidence following the environmental assessment proceeded with the Section 5, Part C, with the associated with the Council of Environmental Quality guidance requirements of the environmental assessment. However, in some circumstances, the appropriate to begin with the proposal for the preparer with the environmental impact statement instead of the environmental assessment, as experienced later with the instruction of the environmental assessment process ends with the FONSI or with findings on non-significant impact with not a notice of intent to prepare for the environmental impact statement. The environmental assessment proceed with conducted by the findings of the known significant impact. The actions may proceed. If the proposed action clearly would have significant environmental impact with a mitigated level of insufficiency of the environmental impact environmental assessment process of the proposed action could not be included in the findings of no significant impact. Components prepared for the environmental impact statement. The components of the Council of Environmental Quality requirement of environmental impact statements and procedure Section 5 Part D, preparing environmental impact statements. The environmental impact system proceed with record of decision until the component of the is issued of the record of decision. No action on the proposal could be taken when the would have an adverse environmental impact and unlimited choice of the other reasonable alternative. Title 40 CFR 1506(1)(a). Once a record of decision is issued, the action may proceed. Should the need, the proposal then into the Council with the Environmental Planning Program Manager appropriately analytical approaches as the category exclusion is proposed to the quality, and then it goes into a yes or no extraordinary circumstances, particularly with the category exclusion into the Environmental Assessment Act. Category applied with compliance with the record of record of environmental consideration, environmental planning, historical planning, decision support system, and strategic categories, and then implementing proposal mitigations as monitoring the need. And if you're needing the consult with the environmental program manager, it does not apply. Effective law effective grants waivers authorized by Congress. The fulfill other appropriate requirements to ensure protection of the human environment. Implementation, proposal, mitigation, and monitoring is needed. Environmental assessment impact goes into unknown potential significant environmental effects, and then the appropriate public and interagency involvement in significant environmental effects, public review and environmental assessment findings on non-significant impact if needed, significant environmental effects, findings on non-significant environmental impact notice for the availability. And then you have your environmental impact statement with a significant environmental notice of intent, scope, including the public involvement, the drafting environmental inspection impact statement, the minimum 45 public day comment, public meetings if needed, final environmental impact statement, public notice 30 days, record of decision. Alright, B. Categorical exclusion in extraordinary circumstances. The Department of Homeland Security categorical exclusion. The Council for the Environmental Quality Regulations, Title 40 CFR 15084, enable the federal agency to establish categories of action for the based on the experience of the non-individual cumulatively have significant impact on the quantity of the human environment, and therefore do not require the environmental assessment. Environmental impact. The category exclusion enable the Department of Homeland to avoid unnecessary efforts of paperwork delay with the concentration on those of the proposed action with the real potential for the environmental impact components that may otherwise decide to prepare environmental impact for any other action anytime with the specific planning of the decision making. See Title 40 CFR 1501 and 15089. Department of Homeland Security category exclusion, specifically the Department of Homeland Security as well as whole individual components is so specified. The Department of Homeland Security may not apply with a category exclusion established by another federal agency to propose the Department of Homeland Security action. However, the Department of Homeland Security must justify application of the Department of Homeland Security category exclusion. Propose the Department of Homeland Security action any other federal agency have similar with the category exclusion for its own similar activity. The Department of Homeland Security category exclusions are divided in the following functional group: the Department of Homeland Security mission activities, administrative regulatory activities, operational activity, real estate, personal property management activity, repair, maintenance activity, construction, installation, demolition activities, hazardous and radioactive materials management, operation training expertise, like federal assistance activities, and components specifically category exclusion. Applying category exclusion. The Department of Homeland Security live for the category exclusion provided with Appendix A, Table 1, considering the application for the category exclusion proposed action with a component to determine if the extraordinary circumstance for the presentment that may cause the significant impact preventing application of the category exclusion for the proposed action to be for the category excluded must satisfy the three conditions described below for the proposed action does not clearly meet all three conditions. The component provided and prepares an environmental assessment or environmental impact statement in accordance with the Council of Environmental Quality requirements meeting the following procedures provided with Section 5, Part C and D, respectively. Certain categories proposed action included with the category excluded in list and have greater potential of involved in the extraordinary circumstances requiring preparation of the record of environmental consideration document of the National Environmental Policy Act described in Section 5, Part B. The category exclusion cannot be used with action significant impact quality of human environmental regardless of the impact of the beneficial adversary of the category exclusion may be applied with the entire program of the Department of Homeland Security activities. If appropriate, of applicant for the category exclusion and proposed action presumes review compliance under other relevant environmental planning, historic preservation laws, regulations, executive orders, such as the National Historic Preservation Act of the Endangered Species Act, has occurred in a higher level of the National Environmental Policy Act of the analysis if it is not warranted as a result of the identified impact of the resource to protect and other requirements. Components consider the following determination whether or not the proposed action is covered by the category exclusion. Clearly fits the category provided with the described in the category exclusion. Entire action clearly fits one or more of the category exclusion. Appendix A, Table 1. Note that the certain category exclusion are restricted to use for the single Department of Homeland Security component with the category exclusion restricted with the particular Department of Homeland Security component with the other component may apply with the category exclusion proposed action. B is not a piece of a larger action. Is appropriate to segment of the proposed connection act with the division smaller parts of it in order to avoid the most extensive evaluation potential for the environmental impact with the National Environmental Policy. The purpose of the National Environmental Policy Act must be considered for the same review of the action connected with an example that include the action triggered force of the other actions where the one action depends on the other E.g., one action is not interdependent on the larger action. One action cannot be perceived unless the other action is taken. No extraordinary circumstances exist. For the presence of one or more extraordinary circumstances preclude the application of the category exclusion. Proposed action with the circumstance would have the significant environmental impact statement required other present of the potential significant environmental impacts or potential cannot be readily determined by the environmental assessment required to determine whether an action normally excludes a resource requires additional evaluation because of the extraordinary circumstances focused on the action potential effects. Consider environmental significance with the effect of the term of the both context, local, state, regional, tribal, national, international intensity components. Consider whether the proposed action involves one or more of the following extraordinary circumstances. One, a potential significant effect of the public safety, health, and public safety. Two, the potential significant effect of the species of the habitat, particularly the environmental ESA of the Marine Mammal Protection Act, of the Migratory Bird Treaty Act, Magnesium Stevens Fishery Conservation Management Act, the other law protecting species or habitats. 3. A potential significant effort of the historic property of the district site of the building structure for the object listed for the eligible for the listing of the National Register historical place, affects traditional cultural property for the sacred site of the leads of the loss of the obstruction, significant scientific, cultural, historic resource. A potential significant effect of the environmental sensitive area, potential for the threatened violation of federal, state, local law requirement imposed to protect the environment. Some examples required is consider local noise control ordinance, requirement to conform with the applicable state implementation law over the air quality standard, federal, tribal, state, local requirements of control hazard, toxic substance, of environmental permits. An effect of the quality of human environment is likely to have the high controversial terms of scientific validity, likely to be highly uncertain, likely to involve the unique unknown environmental risks that include the effect that may result of the use of the new technology, unproven technology, controversially over the include with the proper public opposition proposed action, absent with the any of the administrative potential significant environmental impact does not in fact install with its constitute with extraordinary circumstances. Extends to which perceive the established further action with a significant effect with a significant greater scope of the size of the normally expanded variance for the particular category of action. 9. Potential significant degradation of already existing poor environmental conditions initiate the potential significant environmental degradation influence activity in fact that the area is not already significantly modified natural condition. 10. Where the action is related with the other action with an individually significant cumulative significant impacts. 3. Establish revision and deletion categorical exclusions. Alright, components forward proposal to substantially revive the established new category exclusion together with the jurisdiction with the Department of the Sustainable Environmental Program that established new proposal to substantiate with the revive the established category exclusion requirement of the administrative record with the meet of the Council with Environmental Quality. Standards are subject to the Council of Environmental Quality review and public comment. The substantial environmental programs review of the proposal with the determinant of the category exclusion appropriately include with the Department of Homeland Security wide list, component specific list for the substantiated environmental programs. Revised Appendix A, Table 1 include approved new substantive the revived category exclusion. In addition, with the component of the substantiating environmental programs over the non-substantiated revision deletion with a common specific category exclusion, so that substantiated environmental programs can amend the table accordingly. All category exclusions are list of the extraordinary circumstance of the instruction manual with a review of the substantiating environmental program consolation and contents of the environmental program plans manager at least every 7 years to ensure that they are still appropriate, identify any of the training for the need of the light of the core additional experience with the gain and applying with the category exclusion to propose the Department of Homeland Security complete review of the constructed in the conjunction of the major revision directive of the instruction manual over the 7 years have passed in the last revision. Alright, 4. Your record of environmental consideration. Application for the category exclusion. Proposed action meet for the proposed action with the appropriate include with the category action for the Department of Homeland Security determine that do not individually cumulatively have the significant impact on the human and environmental. Therefore, they are neither preparation for the environmental assessment. Environmental impact is required. Certain category exclusion identified by the asterisk in the Appendix A, Table 1 include classes of the action that have high possibility involving extraordinary circumstances may include the category exclusion or the record of environmental consideration is required with whatever the category exclusion is denoted with an asterisk applied in order to document the potential impact of the human effort environment that has been appropriately considered for the determination of proposed action. Either appropriate category excluded must be analyzed further through the environmental impact, impact statement, environmental assessment, environmental impact statement process. In addition, there may be the incident with a component with a choice with a record of environmental consideration when it is not otherwise required. Record environmental consideration normally prepared, maintained economically, electronically environmental planning historical decision support system. Completion of the record of environmental consideration involve the review and approval of the process to ensure that the appropriate consideration, extraordinary circumstances, quality, National Environmental Policy Act, the analysis of the decision maker has been considered, and impact with the proposal, human effort, environment required with the National Environmental Policy Act, will become the making decision director of the sustainability of the environmental program. Signs all record of considerations as the approval of the National Environmental Policy Act analysis. Otherwise delegated component of supplemental instruction may contain additional information administrative of the procedure for the requirements of the prepare a record of environmental consideration. Alright, C. Environmental assessment. Purpose of the environmental assessment is the concise public document prepared for the proposed action that have the potential significant impact on the quality of the human environmental health for CFR 15089. The environmental assessment process concludes the component determination of environmental impact for the proposed action. Finding no significant impact document is prepared with the components concluded that the proposed action would not have significant environmental impact. The components of the insurer have finds no significant impact in the publicly available. Additional information guidance can be found on the Council of Environmental Quality and guidance such as the Council of the Environmental Quality Memorandum heads for the federal department agency. Improve the process for the preparing efficient and timely environmental review of the National Environmental Policy Act of March 6, 2012. If during the preparation environmental assessment of the component determined the significant impacts would result in the implementation proposed environmental impact statement is required. When to prepare an environmental assessment. The components prepared for the environmental assessment of the following circumstances for the proposed action for the non-categorical action described in environmental available to the Department of Homeland Security category exclusion. There is not enough information in terms of the proposed action significant environmental impact requires in the environmental impact statement. In this situation, environmental assessment may be either determined through the environmental impact evaluation opportunity of the public involvement. The impact with the quality of the human environment will be significant or not. And for proposed action will include with the category action described by the Department of Homeland Security category exclusion, extraordinary circumstances present potential and significant environmental impact through the precluded application for the category exclusion. There is not enough information to determine that the proposed action will have significant environmental impacts requiring the environmental impact statement. Component may decide whether to prepare the environmental assessment practice and planning tool inform decision making of the environmental impacts of the action. D. Other situation conforming with above circumstances that is described by the component in supplemental instruction. 3. Actions do not normally require the environmental assessment problematic environmental assessment. Example, the activity to the width of the commonly component normally prepared with environmental assessment problematic environmental assessment include but not limited to the following: pros construction land use, the activity operation with the use of the potential for the significant impact of the environmental safety sensitive areas. Project impacting wetlands, water of the U.S. does not meet the criteria of the U.S. Engineering National Wide Permit Program. New and revised regulation activities have potential significant effect of the environmental sensitive area. Security measures that involve the permanent closure, limitation, access for the area with the previously open to the public, such as roads and recreational areas with a potential significant environmental impact. No law enforcement field operations where the environmental impacts are unknown, which are potential significant environmental impacts communicated to the level that they're no longer significant with the potential significant environmental controversy is likely. Alright, your problematic environmental assessment. Components of the problematic environmental assessment for the broad federal action with such a program and plan with the action with a similar type of multiple location found with the criteria above when to prepare an environmental assessment site or activity specifically as environmental air assessment can be tailored with a pragmatic environmental assessment with a substantiating environmental assessment. It can be prepared incorporating the reference environmental impacts and evaluation concerned by the problematic environmental assessment. In some cases, the problematic environmental assessments are given enough to contain with sufficient information would require very little additional Evaluation of the application of the Department of Homeland Security category exemption to propose action following with the procedure of the Section 5, Part B2 can also be based upon the evaluation of the contained in the pragmatic environmental assessment. Supplemental environmental assessment. Components may prepare a supplemental environmental assessment to any time proposed action for which the National Environmental Policy Act analyzes previously completed to the National Environmental Policy Analyst ongoing with the substantiating charge proposal relevant to environmental concerns, and C, there is any new circumstance or information relevant to environmental concerns of the hearing on the proposal of the impact. The supplemental environmental impact will only need the focus of the issue for the triggered additional environmental impact evaluation. The original analysis could be incorporated with the reference of the supplemental environmental assessment. Final environmental assessment is supplemented with the finding of non-significant impact has been complete with the component with the finding of the non-significant impact. Components have the discretion regarding type of level of the public involvement of the supplemental environmental assessment. You the factors of Section 4, Part G1. In this case of the action, it has not yet been implemented. 1. The budget cut cycle of not exceeding 3 years of the day with the finding of a non-significant impact. The component of the considered for the analysis of the environmental assessment remains valid for the current state of the proposed activity where this assessment supplemental is needed to be proceeding for the action. Alright, 6. Adoption. Reliance on adoption or existing environmental assessment improve the efficiency of the National Environmental Policy Agency of the Act. The process that avoids unnecessary use of the time. The scope of the Department of Homeland Security component may use another component's environmental assessment without the formal adoption process to provide full coverage, cover the scope of the component of the proposed action, the alternative to the environmental impact. They're relying on the other component of the environmental impact with the finding of the non-significant impact with the component internally to document such reliance when relying on another component of the drafting environmental assessment portion of the component complete with its own final environmental assessment and finding of non-significant impact. Component may adopt another federal agency to draft the final environmental impact portion thereof that provided the full coverage of the scope of the component's proposed action and alternative to the environmental impact. See Title 40 CFR 15063 when the adopting of another federal agency for the draft of the environmental assessment or portion thereof of the components consider the factors Section 4 of the Part G with 1 to determine the appropriate additional public involvement needed. When participating in cooperating agents, the components may need to adopt the environmental assessment portion of the lead agency with an independent review of the document components include for the comments and suggestions have been satisfied. Analysis include the appropriate scope of the level of environmental impact of the evaluation concern. One is proposed action and alternatives when adopting federal agency, the final environmental agency. Environmental assessment portion thereof of the component of the finding of non-significant impact, acknowledging the adoption of the work of federal agency when adopting other federal agency, the environmental impact of the portion of the completion, opponent complying with the final emergency and finding of non-significant impact. R7. The public involvement of the process involved with the environmental impact. With the Council of the Environmental Quality Regulation instruction manual with the public involvement of the National Environmental Public Act of the process with the Department of Homeland Security Act for the public involvement the requirement of the may meet during the scope of the staff of the start of the evaluation and distributing of the draft of the environmental assessment, the finding of the non-significant impact for public review with a diligent with the effort to review with the seeking involved with the public for the drafting of the environmental assessment, non-significant impact including potential for the impact of the quality of human environment of the high controversially have been identified with a component that complete with the environmental assessment, finding of a non-significant impact, without circulating the drafting document of the public review with the diligent effort to include with the consideration extent with the relay with the public ultimate efforts as well with the consideration factors Section 4, Part G1, public notice of the finding of non-significant impact is made with available to the interested party. See Title 40 CFR 15066. Modified with the providing the public notice of the after notice of the finding of non-significant impact with the component that can take an immediate action unless with another environmental planning requirement requires waiting period for the action to proceed with the environmental assessment has been drafted without the proper opportunity the public involvement the publicly input with the receive of the environmental assessment development indicate the need for the further public review with the environmental impact evaluation. Components normally absent exigent circumstances for the made with the environmental assessment available to the public review with the component the minimum of 30 calendar days. If the public comment reveal the potential for the significant impact of the human environmental component determined with the appropriate completion of the finding on a significant impact with the provide the supplemental environmental assessment for environmental impact with the component described with the finding of a significant impact is appropriate and modified with the environmental assessment. Provide consideration any public comments appropriate for the complete the finding of a non-significant impact makes a non-finding of a non-significant impact available to the public. Synopsis of the public comments received and how the component addressed These closed comments, rather than in response to each of the individual comments normally prepared, with the may include with the appendix the final of the environmental assessment. After the finding of a non-significant impact with the made publicly available, the component can be taken immediate action unless other environmental planning requirements require a waiting period before action can proceed. A proposed action unprecedented only the more normally requires an environmental impact statement is closely similar to the one normally requires environmental impact statement. See Section 5, Part D. For 3, the components should be, wherever practicable, provided opportunity to public involvement in the drafting environmental assessment, make the drafting environmental assessment, drafting finding of the non-significant impact available to public review described in Title 40 CFR 1501482. Proposed action, the effective of the national concern. See Section 2, the definition of components published for the public notice of the Federal Register required Title 40 CFR 15066. Submit the substantiating environmental program, drafting the final environmental assessment, finding a non-significant impact, or hyperlink to the documents posted on the component webpage posting on the Department of Homeland Security National Environmental Policy Agency Policy Act webpage according with Section 4, Part G. Alright, your minimum required content for the environmental assessment. Minimum required for the environmental assessment outlined below the title per page. For the purpose of any of the description proposed with action, alternative include the description. Alternatives considered but reject for the description of effective environmental consequence, including conclusion regarding the significant environmental impact of the proposed action, alternative use and consideration communal of the impact with the description proposed, the mitigation monitoring, and if available, the list of the preparers, list of agency personnel, consultant, and contact reference if appropriate. 9. Finding no significant impact of the component over the final determine the environmental impact with the proposed with the action required with the completion of environmental assessment proposed with the conclude with the finding of non-significant impact with the 1. Evaluation impact of the proposed action with the human environmental indicates that the environmental effects would not be the significant component of the 2. The component of the commits include measures of the proposed action that mitigate the impact level significant in Section 5, Part 5 E. Finding of non-significant impact with a separate document with environmental assessment, but may be integrated with an appropriate decision-making document that can be made publicly available to provide with the include with the minimum content requirements of Section 5, Part C10. Part 10. Minimum required content for finding a non-significant impact. Finding a non-significant impact document either attached with the environmental assessment, incorporated with the environmental assessment, the reference consistent with the following: the name of the brief, the description, proposed action, alternative, the summary of the result of the environmental impact evaluation, and identification of any mitigation components over the commitments, including the monitoring of the implementation of the proposed action, reduced for the otherwise significant impact. Statement of the proposed action, which will have non-significant impact with the quality of human environment. The statement of the final agency for the analysis result of the finding of a non-significant impact must come with the final decision. Dated in the decision with a signature block over the staff name of the component that has decision-making authority regarding the requirement of the consider of the potential impact for the human environment and decision-making power of the components that have not received the delegation for see Section 4, Part K. Signature block over the substantiated environmental programs. Normally made more than 5 pages in length and incorporated with the comments of the attachment necessary to avoid creating a lengthier finding a non-significant impact document. Environmental impact statements pack. D. Purpose. Your environmental impact statement is prepared with a major federal action with significant affecting the quality of the human environment is Title 40 CFR 1502 for the preparation of the environmental impact statement involved with a more formal process of work collaborative with the federal, tribal, state, local, non-federal interested party to provide with a more formal opportunity for the public to understand the potential environmental impacts and influence of the federal agency to determine a decision of the environmental impact with the evaluation document of the environmental impact statement may be made extensive with the then an environmental assessment if the appropriate to reflect with the evaluation significant impact with the quality of the human environment. Detailed information requirement of the environmental impact statement with the found with the Council of the Environmental Quality regulation guide with the such for the Council of the Environmental Quality memorandum for heads of federal department agencies improve the process of the preparing efficiency for timely environmental reviews under the National Environmental Policy Act with the March 6, 2012. No alternative in the whole part of the subject of the environmental impact statement will be taken would be limited with the choice of the responsibility alternative involved with the conflict with the use of available resources that have adversely impact until the record of decision has been made publicly available. The record of decision notice of the availability is published in the Federal Register. 2. When preparing an environmental impact statement, the component review of the environmental impacts of the proposed action reasonable alternative with the significant environmental effect with include with the action of the environmental assessment conclude whether the significant impact therefore preparation of environmental impact statement was necessary. However, the components have the option for the pressure of the prepare environmental impact statement whenever there's good reason to do so for any activity at any time. Action normally requiring the environmental impact statement the pragmatic environmental impact impact statement and legislative impact statement. Sample the activities with the component normally environmental impact statement, the pragmatic environmental impact statement, the legislative impact statement, but include but are not limited to the following. Activities of the effect of the human environment are likely to be highly controversial in terms of environmental impact that involve with unique environmental risk. Construction projects that have a significant effect with environmental sensitive activity areas. Major federal actions occur in the U.S. known to have caused significant environmental effect of the global commons for the term of the defined in the Executive Order 1211, of the environmental effect of the broad of the major federal actions. Change the area, scope, of the type of the tempo of the operations that would result in the significant environmental effect of the action with required with the change and treaty to develop the environmental impact statement. Pragmatic environmental impact statement. The component of the prepare with the pragmatic environmental impact statement on a broad federal action with the plan program action for the similar type of the multiple locations which only have very general environmental information known. Site-specific environmental impact statement, environmental assessment committee carried with a pragmatic environmental environmental impact statement incorporated with the reference to the environmental impact evaluation contained in programmatic environmental impact statement. Alright, 5. Your legislative environmental impact statement. The legislative environmental impact statement that was circulated with a non-budgetary legislative proposal initiated with the Department of Homeland Security with the request of the drafting assistance by any member of the legislative branch would have significant impacts on the natural and human environment of Title 40 CFR 1506 and 8. Alright, 6. Supplemental environmental impact statement. The component may require the supplemental environmental impact statement with the change of the proposal relative to the environmental concern with the area with a significant new circumstance with information relevant to the environmental concern with the bearing on the proposal with the impact with Title 40 CFR 15029 C21. The component may also have the supplemental the draft environmental impact statement, the final environmental impact statement, and they anytime with a further elevation that they're presented with the original impact statement. Components particularly with the circulated with the following supplemental of the drafting information environmental impact statement and the final environmental impact statement in the same manner with the department and the department of the draft environmental impact statement and final impact statement the example of the scoring with the option for this supplemental environmental impact statement the titles 40 CFR 15029 C4 public notice method is chosen through the appropriate for the reaching with the person with the interest with the effect of the proposal of the final environmental impact statement the supplement with the record of the decision has been completed with the component to comply with the new record of the decision published with the notice of its availability with the Federal Register. If the action has not been implemented, one by the budget cycle of the 9 with the year of the day of the record of the decision component that considers the the environmental impact statement that remains valid with the current state of the proposed activity, the supplemental need for the proceeding with the action. Or except for the adoption, reliance of the adoption of the existing environmental impact statement to improve the efficiency of the National Environmental Policy Act with the process of the voids unnecessary use for the time of the reach for the Department of Homeland Security component may be used another component of the environmental impact statement with a further formal adoption process to provide with the full cover of the scope of the component of the proposed action alternate with the environmental impacts from them relying with another component of the environmental impact statement the components require record of the decision published for the notice available to the Federal Register for the relying with the component of the either environmental drafting environmental impact statement or portion of the component comply with the final environmental impact statement which is filed with the environmental protection agency completes its own record of decision published for the record of decision notice available in the Federal Register. A component made adopt the federal agency with the existing drafting of the final environmental inspection statement with the portion provided to fully cover the scope of the component of the proposed action with ultimate environmental impact. See Title 40 CFR 15063 with adopting of the federal agency the draft of the final environmental impact statement. Portion thereof with the conservative the fact of the Section 4 with the Part G with the 1 to determine the appropriate additional applicable involvement needed. If the action covered the federal agency environmental impact of the component of the proposed action substantially for the same of the component that normally recirculates for the document is filed within the MBPA with the banks of the available to the agency of the public, including the statement to describe the receipt of the proposed action and acknowledging the additional environmental impact statement, the Title 40 CFR 15063B, once complete the record of the decision with the published for the non-notice of availability of the Federal Register. Participating with the cooperative agency of the component may adopt the lead with the environmental impact statement with the portion without recirculating with the after the independent review of the document component that includes the components have been satisfied and analysis include the appropriate scope and level of the environmental evaluation components proposed activity alternatives to these Title 40 CFR 15063 C with additional with the lead for the federal agency the environmental impact statement portion of the components completion of the record of the decision acknowledgement adoption of the work of the federal agency for the published for the notice of availability and the Federal Register for the adopting of the lead federal agency draft of the environmental impact statement the portion thereof the completing of the components is not its own completes its own final and environmental impact statement and record of decision. Part 8. Approving and filing an environmental impact statement. In accordance with the memorandum of agreement between the Council of Environmental Quality and the Environmental Protection Agency, the Environmental Protection Agency is reasonable to receive the filing the environmental impact statement prepared by the federal agency. Every week, the Federal Registry of the Environmental Public Agency publishes the national notice of the availability for all environmental impact statements filed during the previous week. The Department of Homeland Security set up the preparation and filing of the environmental impact statement prescribed by the Council of Environmental Quality. See Title 40 CFR 1506-9 with the 1506-10 with additional information provided by the Council for the Environmental Quality, the Environmental Environmental Protection Agency guidance. See the Environmental Public Agency guidance amended with the environmental impact statement. The following system guidance published in Federal Register on January 11, 2011. Components will also view the following section of Section 4, Part C, regarding the notifying the substantiating of the environmental program and substantiating sustainability environmental programs in Section 4, Part G1, running public involvement in the environmental public agency with the notice availability, official public notification of the environmental impact statement. The components may be public for the notice availability to provide more information for the public, although it is not required. All right, your minimum required content for the environmental impact statement. Your Council of the Equipment with the Council of the Council of Environmental Quality Regulation for the Title 40 CFR 1502 for the 10 with a provide example of the form and as for the environmental impact statement. Title 40 CFR 1508-225 with the scope of the range of the action of the impacts for the concern for the environmental impact statement. The non-stream for the Department of Homeland Security component with the vary for the Council of the Equipment, environmental quality with the example of the complying with the region for the appropriate structure for the environmental impact statement. With the one with the facility of communication with the environmental impact evaluation resolute in manner of the concise, efficient, and the most easily understood with the proponents of the general public. For example, the decision of the effective environmental consequence with the combined with the product of the document with a shorter length with it easier to read and understand. Level of public involvement in the development of the environmental impact statement determine the consideration factor for the section 4, part G1 with the length of the environmental impact varies based on the project, type of the project size, potential environmental concern with the current standard format with the environmental impact statement outlined below. Cover sheet summary, table of content for the purpose for the need of the action, alternative, the conservative, include with the proposed action, known action, the alternative, effective, the environment-based condition, baseline condition that may be impacted, environmental, socio-economic consequences, listed, prepared, distribution list with appendix, index, and list, appendixes. Components U for the erratic, sheet for the detail for the drafting environmental impact statement, and in lieu of the tradition of the final impact statement allowed with the Title 40 CFR 15034C. U for the error, sheet for the appropriate, the comment to C with the drafting environmental impact statement as a minor for the component to respond for the comments and the limited of the factual correction and explanation for the comments that do not warrant the further response when the applying of the provision or errata. Sheet of the information required with the environmental impact statement is described below within the drafting environmental statement. The document filed with the environmental public agency provide with the public filing the council equipment of council environmental quality requirements of the final environmental impact statement. Alright, when using a errata sheet, they include but not limited to the following information, at least factual correction with the drafting environmental impact sheet with the reference to the relevant page number of the drafting environmental impact sheet. Synopsis of components for the drafting environmental impact sheet with the explanation for the comment that do not warrant but the further response with the final impact sheet with the citing with the source for the authority region and the source with the components per position. Appropriate indications serve specifically trigger with the trigger repairs with the further response. Particular information could lead with the reevaluation system. Supplemental environmental system impacts statement. Identification preferred alternative for the discussion region was a selected list for the common mitigation measure for the preferred alternative for the copy summary of the comments reserved for the drafting environmental impact statement. Respond with including the coordination and activities of the department drafting environmental impact statement. Alright, 10. Recursive decision. The component device with whether or not to take an action proposal cover the environmental impact statement. The decision document known with the record of decision is prepared with the concept of the requirements of the record of decision found with the Title 40 CFR 1505 with about 2. The record of decision available separate document environmental impact statement that may be integrated with another appropriate decision making that can be made with publicly available to provide with the content required with the record of decision may be publicly available to publish the notice availability in the Federal Register and for the issue in the meeting and one more the exemption of the Information Disclosure Freedom of Information Act presents all of the facts of the agency with the concern of the breach of the decision whether or two or the so how proposed to see the protection action for the record of the decision indicates the method mitigation measure as in which for the important of the Department of Homeland Security decision making, especially for the measure produced, the otherwise significant impact of the components such amid the record of decision hyperlinking over the record of decision onto the web page of the SEP, which is substantiating environmental program for posting with the Department of Homeland Security National Environmental Policy Act webpage in accordance with the Section 4 Part G2. The mitigation and monitoring measure to reduce otherwise anticipated adverse impact of the proposed action quality of the human environment called for the mitigation measure when the component amidst the mitigation measure produced the implement limiting potential adversely affect the action and essential for the component for the eliminating of the measure mounted for the effectiveness for the component for the measure appropriate for the particular implementation mitigation measure for the found the finding of no significant impact of the record of the decision that have the sufficient legal authority to implement impose applications of mitigation measure for the particular implementatable those that were reasonably expected to achieve the induced intended purpose of the implementation and simple and tablable mitigation measure that required not only for the component that have appropriate legal authority but also contain reasonable force able to be able to resolve the perform the mitigation for the mitigation of being proposed to the applicant with the Department of Homeland Security approval to perform proposed act components of the mitigation condition of the Department of Homeland Security approval of the application for the purpose and organization external of the Department of Homeland Security 40 CFR 15053 prior commencement of the during an implementation of the action mitigation measure for the component of the committee but cannot be implemented in condition to have changed the judge for the mitigation measure that no longer be applicable to the component to determine the practicability mitigation measurements can be implemented in necessary coordination with the federal, tribal, state, local government agency that are appropriate inclusion in the National Environmental Policy Act and analyze the predictive of the whole and part of the question of the components considered whether or not the National Environmental Policy Act with a decision sustained with identified mitigation with the component with the considered with the National Environmental Policy Act document needs to be revised to affect the new circumstances if it does not comply with the periodic and appropriate with the public notice of the provision after the action may proceed. Components of the monitoring and implemented of the active effectiveness of the mitigation found with the guidance of the Council of the Environmental Quality Memorandum ahead of the Federal Department, the agency for the appropriate use of mitigation monitors, appropriate use of the mitigation, mitigated finding for the non-significant impact, Title 4, January 14, 2011. And that gives you an address. Components are also responding to inquire to the public agency for the required of the staff of the mitigation measure for the resolve of the measure for the proposed action monitoring, finding of the mitigation that can be effective with the mitigating the adverse impact of the action for the components, consequently with the OGC, with the Office of the General Counsel, respectively engineering environmental planning program, and to determine the necessary for the course of the action following Section 4, Part C, circumstances requiring identification of sustainability environmental program. Additional adequately documented monitoring mitigation of the National Environmental Policy Act with the purpose of the informed, transparent environmental decision making for to implement document of the monitoring mitigation made under the integrity of the National Environmental Policy Act with the compromise of the accuracy of the National Environmental Policy Act with a compliance effort there as one component that is committed with the mitigation measure. All the decisions modified, suspended with the measure that are made with the consultation of the Office of the General Counsel with the component of the respect of the environmental planning program manager. 5. Cooperation with a joint legal lead agency relationships. Alright, F. Cooperating in joint lead agency relationship. Council of Environmental Quality Regulations, see Title 40-1501, 6 of the Emphasized Agency Cooperation National Environmental Policy Act. Processes sometimes promote the Department of Homeland Security action impact with the impact of the mission activity of the other agency in such situations. If it necessary, establish lead or cooperating agency relationship with the joint lead with the agency with the relationship to minimize with the avoiding and duplicate with the redundant with the National Environmental Policy Act compliant. Efforts establishing type of the relationship made appropriate with another federal agency, tribe, state, local environment agency with comparable to the National Environmental Policy Act. The requirement to either process involved with the same action, but involved with a group of the action, if directly related to each other with a functioning interdependency, geographical proximity. See Title 40 CFR 15015 of the Interagency Memorandum of Agreement. Memorandum of Agreement is normally extended to identify leave of the cooperative agent with the document with the role of the responsibility to establish the timeline with the milestone with the head with the extension for the made the right. Another type of the form of the document relationship besides the exchange with the within written corresponding component of the Council of the Environmental Quality Regulations, guided by the cooperating agency, memorandum head of the federal agency's report and cooperative agency, and the implement of the procedural requirements of the National Environmental Policy Act of December 23, 2004, memorandum of the head of the federal agency, cooperative agency, implementation procedure with the requirements of the National Environmental Policy Act of January 30, 2002. The benefit of the cooperative agency participation for the preparation of National Environmental Policy Act with the documents include: 1. Disclosing relevant information for the National Policy Act with the process; 2. Applying with the available expertise for the staff support; avoiding duplication of the other federal, tribal, state, and local requirements; establishing mechanisms for addressing intergovernmental issue; fostering an interim and intergovernmental trustee; with enhancing agency for the ability to environmental documents for the common with the lead agency; may invite other appropriate federal agency jurisdiction such as regulatory jurisdiction authority, manage land, water with the component proposed locate an action or related mission authorities, among the other things, to be comparative the agency with the component of the National Environmental Policy Act for the efforts for the addition of the component may divide with the federal agency with such expertise with a particular environmental issue to be cooperative agency components may also invite with the tribes, the non-federal agency with the cooperative, the joint lead agency in order to eliminate duplication, tribal, state, local requirements of the applicable National Environmental Policy Act. Alright, the component may become with the cooperating agency for the federal agency for the National Environmental Policy Act with the effort of the request for the agency for the component for the jurisdiction layout over the expected of the federal agency proposed activity required for the action by the component may also become a cooperative agency for the federal agency for the National Environmental Policy Act effort of the request for that the agency for the component with the special expertise, virtues, statutory relations, responsibility, mission related with the program experience with the relevant the other of the federal agency proposal. A component may also be the request of the federal agency for the designated the cooperating agency. If another agency requires the component with the cooperating agency of the National Environmental Policy Act with the component of the claim with the exit for the cooperative agency status, component records the requesting agency proposed with the copy of the evidence respond to the directive for the substantiated of the environmental program, Council of Environmental Quality, Title 40 CFR 150163. C. The denial is not subject to the oversight of the Director of the Substantiated Environmental Program, not subject to the review of the Administrative Procedural Act, Title 5 U.S. Standard Code 701, Attend Sequence, Director of the Substantiated of the Environmental Program, review of the request to determine whether another component needs for the consideration of the cooperative of the agency staff. The components to prepare the environmental impact of the environmental impact statement. Environmental assessment. Environmental impact statement is an annual report information cooperating with the agency of the substantiation of the environmental program for consolidating Department of Homeland Security reporting the control of environmental quality. Alright, G. National Environmental Policy Act, analyzing, analyst, and writing. Components for the emphasize of the quality of the analysis for the documentation, potential environmental impact, the responsible alternative for the economically, technically feasible to meet the mission's need, for the strategic mitigate, need with the adversely affected in order to improve the quality of the produced paperwork control link with the National Environmental Protection Agency, the documentation, the consequently close to file with the requirement of Title 40 CFR 1504 with the guidance of the Council of Environmental Quality to determine even the memorandum head of the Federal Department Agency to improve the process of the providing efficiency and the timely environmental reviews under the National Environmental Policy Act on 6th of March 2012. Appropriate structure in the form of environmental assessment, environmental impact statement is one with the facility of the written communication impact with environmental evaluation, result of the manual with the concise, efficient, mostly easily understood of the proponent in general for the public with the depth, the scope of the analysis of the resulting following, even the documentation of the National Environmental Policy, the process for the relevant and proportional for the complexity, project level to the anticipated environmental effect for the depth of the score of the analysis of the normally informed level, the anticipated environmental effects of the object with the proposed environmental assessment, environmental impact statement is to communicate quality analysis and support with the Department of Homeland Security, not the production of lengthy documents. The main body of the environmental impact statement is normally a presentation designed for the general public with a written plain language. Generally summarize the environmental impact with evaluation relative to the scope of the issue, the development of appropriate mitigation strategies with sufficient detail for the Council of Environmental Quality requirements related with the background information included with the appendix of the summary required with the environmental impact statement. Title 4 CFR 1502, 12 of the optional for the environmental assessment presents a result of the environmental impact evaluation stressing major conclusion areas of controversy issue for the be resolved not to be summary of the document. Following normally to consider the following are normally considered in consideration by the National Environmental Policy Act. Documentation prepared with the Department of Homeland Action, scope, depth, the pertinence of the analysis relevant to proposed action, alternatives, anticipated environmental impact, scientific integrity of the analysis, performance requirement of the Council of Environmental Quality Instruction Manual and the Instruction Manual, and the general presentation readability of the information. Alright, Section 6, Emergency Actions, and we're going to cut the tape there.